right, well, one of the disadvantages of being the last group is that you're the last group. But one of the advantages is we got a lot of material to use. And I, too, have a very, very tough Italian mother. So I appreciated Scaramucci's speech earlier today. But this is the Global Real Estate Panel. We're in a global city. Couldn't be a better place to chat about it. My name is Charles Foschini. I'm a Senior Managing Director at Berkadia. That's the largest privately held real estate investment bank owned by Warren Buffett and Jeffries. And in brief, I make big loans on big buildings. I put deals together all over the country. I've been in Miami doing that since 1985. And I'll let my panel introduce themselves.
Hey guys, I'm Jonathan Lonsdale. I run Ender. We're building the modern operating system for real estate. And previously, I was a VC for over a decade.
Hi everyone, John Catsimatidis, based out of New York, family business. Father came here as an immigrant from Greece, started with nothing, was able to build the American dream into a number of different businesses, one of those being real estate, and we're active in Florida and looking to expand.
Good afternoon, Andrew Velo with the Related Group based here in Miami. I focus on affordable and workforce housing development, and the Related Group is a large commercial real estate developer headquartered here in Miami and also with a presence throughout the Southeast.
I've heard of it.
Have you?
So I flew in last night from California. I was at a conference there the last few days, and the weather in terms of climate was the same, but there's a lot of things that we heard today that are very different and certainly continue to drive migration from new places. And John, I know that you've been based in New York, you have an international presence, but lately your assets and your focus has been in Florida. You want to give us your view as to why Florida?
Yeah, sure thing. And just if you don't mind, before getting started, I just wanted for everyone to give a round of applause to John Hartley, because what an event for this to go on. One of the most principled and smartest people I know. If we were running a yearbook contest, I think he would be voted most likely to be Fed chair at a minimum. So, yeah, absolutely. So based in New York, we've spent quite a bit of time building residential buildings up there and can get into more of our strategy a little bit later on. But, the great migration, people are moving down here, they're moving to the Smile States, and I don't think there's an end in sight. You look at one-way U-Haul traffic. Florida, I think, still ranks number 2, and it has been. Texas being number 1, where John is based. And it's not for any other reason than, it's a better place to be down here. It's a better business climate. It's lower taxes. I up until recently, I never thought I'd know what it was like to live in an Ayn Rand novel. And New York is moving in that direction, and it's very worrying to us. So as part of that, we probably have land for 5 or 6 more buildings to build in New York, but we committed for the next $1 billion we spend to be in Florida. So if anybody knows any good sites, please let us know.
So Andrew, I moved here in 1983 to go to school, never left, and Related dominated the skylines then and continues to dominate the skylines now. How has your perception of Florida evolved and changed, or really Georgia's over the years?
Sure. So Miami is our home base and where we've focused on over the last 40 years. We are doing everything here from waterfront luxury condo development to luxury market rate rentals to affordable housing and public housing redevelopment in the inner city. And we're planning on doing that, for the foreseeable future. But I think there are other markets in Florida now that have become increasingly attractive that hadn't been historically. I know John's working on a big project in St. Pete, the Tampa St. Pete area.
I call it the Brooklyn of Tampa, or the Austin of Florida.
Yes, I think that's spot on. So I think that's another market that has seen a lot of demand and interest from the Related Group and others. And within South Florida, West Palm Beach has had its own node of activity in terms of attracting financial firms and the growth that comes from that. So I would say that there's a lot more markets in Florida now that have become very attractive.
And so this is a global city. We're an international stage, an international forum, but all I keep hearing about in the office is Live Local. Do you want to talk about Florida's Live Local Act and maybe how our political climate here is different, both in terms of encouraging business and looking for a creative way to solve affordable housing?
Sure. So the state of Florida last year enacted a law called the Live Local Act that was pretty transformational for the impact it'll have on real estate development throughout the state. And I don't think it got a lot of press nationally, but it was really the state of Florida deciding to emphasize the need for more workforce housing, and that is in response to the dramatic increase in housing costs that came about with all of this growth and all of this influx of people. And so what this act did, it did a few different things. For one, it introduced an ad valorem property tax abatement that developers can avail themselves of if they're providing affordable housing. And in New York, the 421A program, there's a history of state incentivized, real estate tax abatements. I think this one was very well calibrated here in Florida to promote that kind of growth. And the way the state defines affordable housing, it's up to 120% of area median income, which is industry jargon, but essentially it's the kinds of income that a teacher or a police officer, firefighter, nurses, et cetera, would make. The act also is notorious, has gotten most headlines for some of its zoning preemption, so it's allowing developers to override local zoning regulations if they're promoting or if they're proposing a building that includes affordable or workforce housing. So that has led to some controversial proposals. And then there's also a piece of additional funding that the state is putting out annually to promote this kind of development. So what this has done is I think it's brought in a lot of out-of-state developers that have been used to these kinds of programs in other states. Like in Texas, there's this PFC program. I mentioned the New York tax abatement program. And it's also causing pure market rate developers to think about how to incorporate affordable and workforce housing, which is really the intent of the bill.
John,
Yeah, sure. No, and it's I think from what I've read about the program, it seems like a lot more of a market-driven rationale, and I'll just contrast it up with New York, where 421A, it's still it's now gone, and they're trying to rephase it in, and you've basically seen new rental development ground to a halt. And I think most of the people in the city council have the best interest at heart for the community. I want to assume the best in people, but it seems like folks in Florida like the invisible hand of market guiding things, and people in New York like the claws of the state. But it's a fundamental misunderstanding of supply and demand, right? I think the great thing about the Live Local Act is that it's really, the zoning, while it might be controversial, it increases the amount of supply both for market rate and for affordable. And I believe market-driven policies are really the best way to do it. So it seems like a pretty good system, and I'm hoping to take advantage of it.
And I'll just add to that a little bit. I've got a client that through the city of Miami-Dade County, has really been very innovative in allowing you to have increased density bonuses if you build some more AMI, and they also forgive permit fees. And if you're near mass transit, they don't require you to add parking, which is one of the most expensive parts of new construction. And our city has really become a model for other cities in terms of how to do it. It's not coming fast enough. There's still a big disparity, but it is a solution that's been very, very innovative. And along the lines of innovative solutions, bring you in, talk about tech. I mean, real estate, at least commercial real estate where we're involved, has been very slow to adapt tech the way that residential real estate had in terms of condos and selling houses. Pandemic started to change that, and you're now in a prop tech, so tell us a little bit about that.
I am. Yeah, so I feel most people in real estate tend to be more Luddites on the technology side. But what's nice is that they're rational economic buyers of technology. So I guess the pandemic really pushed people to do more self-showings. Groups that said they'd never do that. I talked to one unnamed, I'll say, client who said you can never do self-showings in a multifamily because people might poop in the toilet. Um, and that was like the reason why, because like if you do self-showing, what if someone poops in the toilet? You can't, it doesn't work. Yeah, so it turns out people don't poop in the toilet. It works out pretty fine. And I feel more and more groups are going to see, we'll talk AI more later, but the technology is going to progress slower in 1 year than people think, but much, much faster in 5 years. I think it's going to be a complete industry shift in the next 5 years.
Can you give us some examples of where it's being used?
Where it's being used right now?
Yeah.
Right now. Yeah. Right now, I feel AI is a great teacher and a bad decision maker. And by that, I mean, even for every company that's using Copilot, which is something that helps engineers code and give suggestions, not one, the most tech-forward company is letting an AI push code to production. Like, no one's actually letting the AI make decisions, it's guiding them. And that's currently being used, actually, so my co-founder, CTO, was formerly co-founder, CTO of Adapar. They started a company called Dynasty, and they were actually the first AI chatbot, or the first AI use case for all of real estate. They made a product called Lisa that AppFolio acquired, and it was basically or a use case at scale, I'll say. And it's basically an AI chatbot for scheduling leasing with tenants, right? And that's like one of the first early use cases. You'll see these chatbots for scheduling with vendors, with tenants, with tenant prospects to see units. You'll see it more on the customer success side, and then eventually you'll start to see it more on the coordination side. Because if you think of property management as a whole, you have, this person's a property manager, so you have a tenant and you have a vendor. And really what's happening is the vendor's talking to the property manager, talking to the tenant, it keeps going back and forth. And software is really good at coordinating. So eventually the software's going to learn how to coordinate and automate those processes.
John, are you using any technology in your condo project?
So, yeah, no, absolutely. And to be honest with you, I think very few of the current, and John can get into this, but very few of the current technology stacks that exist for real estate management are equipped for what's going to happen within AI. And I think it would be a great discussion for him to talk about that, if you don't mind, because I think, the more commoditized your product.
John, I'm the moderator.
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, because we've talked about this at length, and honestly, when Ender is ready for New York, we're going to be using the product.
All right, well, I want to do that. That's a great ad, but I don't want to leave you out of the conversation, and I've been to a lot of related projects, so I know you're always evolving how you use technology.
Sure. No, I feel like I'm caught in between,
No, my fault. I'm sorry.
Good. Yeah, I mean, I'll be brief. I think as I think about the development life cycle, from acquisitions to development, construction, and operations, there's technology tools that are coming about in all of those different stages. So on the acquisition side, there are tools now that allow you to research a property's zoning and its massing potential a lot more quickly than you could have previously. On the development side, there's tools that are being developed that'll more smartly read construction drawings and identify issues with code compliance or lack of coordination between different disciplines. On the construction side, there's new construction methods that are being developed. That one I think has seen less sort of mass adoption, and there's still more testing that needs to happen. But I think on the operations side is really the lowest hanging fruit, where there's huge need for more efficient operations. And so I would really love to hear more about what John is working on.
Yeah, I think what's happening now what has happened in the industry is there are these core accounting systems, and they're like the Yardis and Real Pages of the world, and everything, and they're kind of the source of truth. But then everyone realized, their tenant module isn't that great, or their leasing module is kind of annoying, and their work order modules, it's not that efficient, their underwriting is not that great. So they end up being a blossoming of all these different single point solutions in the industry. So there's, on average, the institutional group I talk to has over a dozen. Some of them have like 18 to 20 or so. And
Berkadia's tagline is built for the now and the next, and we employ in India a large group of data scientists that aggregate that data and do the same thing. Because if you look at CoStar or Yardi or independently, sometimes you have very good data, but many times the data is different. And you have to have a way as an individual to interpret the data, aggregate it, and then give you back the best data from each component. And there's also a lot of resources in terms of what's publicly available. So there's TREP and some of those
Yeah.
things. But as an individual, to reach into that and pull out the information you need, loan maturities, tenant expirations, it's virtually impossible, right? But AI.
Yeah, and that's just on like the lending side, right? The operations side is even more complex. So the core issue comes down to is when we first looked at the problem. Like my co-founder built Adapar, we were like, oh, this is a data aggregation problem. Just like aggregate the data and just use something like Tableau and look at it. But then the problem there is you can't actually go a layer deeper, right? You can't actually go into the single point solution and change something. You can't actually go into the accounting system and change anything. So we realized what the industry really is missing is a single source of truth. And that's what we've built at our company. That's what we're creating. And the whole point is to have like an open API. You could use anything you want, but the APIs actually go both ways. It doesn't take a 9-day integration period like one of our competitors. So that's kind of why we built our company. And from there, you can actually apply AI, and you can actually automate and augment these workflows instead of the current state of the world where you have to go in every single point solution. You have to aggregate the data yourself. From there, you might get some reports. Even then, you might have to open up the little piece of software to like gather that data that way.
So your AI will both pull out the data, interpret it, and then push it back to the customer?
Yeah.
And I'd say, like, what the previous panel was talking about applying AI to private equity type businesses, I think is a really big theme, and it also applies to real estate. But there's a bifurcation there that you need to look at, and it really has to do with whether the product is commoditized or is it kind of a premium product that has pricing power. Because you can get all excited about this technology where you're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars of CapEx, but if your pricing in the market is going to have to compete on a commoditized basis with your competitors, then all of that value that you're going to be spending is going to be transferred to consumers. So we can get all excited about this, but the truth is, in a lot of commoditized real estate and rental product, it's a race to the bottom as far as operating efficiently. And so if you're not integrating this kind of software, you're going to have a big problem.
Real estate's very local. It's the one asset that doesn't move, right? The way stocks and bonds can. But we are in a international climate that's very unique and different right now with Ukraine, with Israel. How do you see that either attracting capital to the U.S. and Florida specifically, or being a deterrent?
I'm sure I'll start. In terms of our condo developments here in South Florida, the majority of our buyer base is U.S. based, and a large part coming from other parts of the U.S. But about 40% of our buyers are foreign investors. In Miami, the predominant mix is still Latin America, but we are seeing some other regions of the world beginning to buy more of our local real estate. This might be a surprising one, but Turkey, there's a lot of investors buying from Turkey. I don't know if you've seen that in St. Pete, but.
If I lived in Turkey, I'd try to move to the U.S. And I'm not saying that as a Greek. There's nothing wrong with Turkey. It's just the lira, right? It's like it's an inflation issue. It's just like I say, if I lived in Venezuela, I would own Bitcoin. I'm not trying to be anti-Turkey.
I spent 3 days in Istanbul this summer. It was very nice.
Yeah, Istanbul's great. I didn't mean to, it was a joke. So, sorry.
Yeah, my Nigerian prince friend, actually real prince though, I swear. He actually only has stable coins in Nigeria because the inflation's like 28%.
No, I think the United States is always going to be the capital of the world as far as investment. I mean, no matter how much we inflate, and the stability of our system and our courts, it's the best. And Florida, I think, is the best place to do it right now.
Well, John told me I was the last panel. I really had to watch the clocks. That's why I have my phone open. But let's bring it closer to home and talk about some of the headwinds that we have here. We've got increasing interest rates, which we heard on the last panel has been a big influence. We've got credit changes, and then globally to some degree, but very specifically the coastal areas, which Florida is most, we have insurance as a big factor. I'm curious how you guys work through that.
Yeah, luckily for us, at least for Ender, we're just building the software. So we're like picks and shovels business. So up or down, you still need to do your accounting and do the reporting and fix the toilets.
Yeah, obviously the dramatic increase in rates led to some challenges over the last year. But it's not an environment where the banks have completely stopped lending, and especially to larger balance sheet and credit-worthy developers. So the cost of lending has gone up, but it's still a manageable environment. I think on the construction cost side, you're starting to see some softening in subcontractor pricing and willingness to negotiate. So I think some of that, we're not going to go back down to the pricing levels of a couple years ago, but I think you're maybe going to see some slight dips there and just some leveling out. Insurance is a huge, area of concern. There was also a dramatic, jump in insurance costs there. And, as you think about a long-term risk for Florida, I think that's one of the bigger ones. Flood insurance is essentially nationalized, and if the private insurance market pulls out of wind coverage in Florida, for instance, as a possibility, that would have some pretty dramatic consequences. But for now, the increase in selling prices and in rents have been able to offset the increase in insurance, and so deals still pencil. But it's more challenging now, I think it'll lead to more or require more disciplined underwriting.
When you talked about the softening in construction costs, is that on the labor side or the material side or both?
Both. And I think, comparing Florida to other markets, there are more challenges as it relates to labor in some other regions of the country. And I think, material prices for us, the big one here is concrete, especially in South Florida. But some of that, has kind of leveled off where, a couple of years ago we were seeing monthly, dramatic hikes.
Did you see the same?
We're seeing some softening, which is good. And rate-wise, I mean, our whole business is really built on buying bankrupt, distressed, and undermanaged businesses, and that also applies to real estate. So while we don't want to see people's jobs impacted and things like that, we've been sort of preparing for that to happen because we thought there was going to be a little bit of a reckoning. Now, I talked to some of our bank partners where last year was the theme of extensions, giving one-year extensions to these on these loans. This year is the year of you better put up some more equity or we're going to force you to sell. So if I was a JLL or a Cushman & Wakefield, I'd be excited about the year ahead.
So you think there's opportunity coming?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, a number of groups too are expanding just because they've slowed on acquisitions. They're figuring out how to third-party manage, and you can see with Invitation Homes, they recently started third-party managing for the first time.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.